Welcome to Sales Podcast, session 92. Let's get you noticed in a noisy world. Welcome to the 92nd edition of the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. Today I'm fired up. We've got Mr. Michael Hyatt. You may know him from his Platform University. He's an author, spent many years, I think 23 years in the publishing world. He gets into that and how he made the switch into being an entrepreneur. We talk about getting published, talk about building your platform so you get found in a noisy world. But man, what a good guy. I met him back in January of this year at a dinner we had with Infusionsoft. Got to hang out with him and his daughter Mary. I met several other cool folks that will be on the podcast as well. And, you know, Michael was gracious enough to agree to come on the show. Had him scheduled back in July. And man, you talk about mortified. I missed the appointment. I don't know what happened. I had my Skype open. I think I had preferences or notifications turned off and did not hear him ringing me till an hour afterwards. I have no idea how that happened. It's the only 92 interviews. Actually, I've got 7 or 8 more already done, so I have close to 100 done. That's the only one I've ever missed, and I missed it with Michael. So it took another almost 5 months, I think 4 months to get him rescheduled. He really is that busy, and he does stick to his schedule, which is one of the reasons he's successful. You know, he schedules his time. He's disciplined about sticking with it, and that's how he meets his goals and objectives, which is something we can all learn to do mo better. Now, something else we can do mo better is our marketing. So today's funny is more of a moral with a little story, a little parable, if you will. It's about an old man, a boy, and a donkey. They were going into town. The boy was riding the donkey, and the old man walked. And as they went along, they passed some people who remarked it was a shame that the old man was walking and that young boy was riding. So they switched positions. They thought maybe the critics were right. But later on, they passed some people that remarked, what a shame that old man makes that little boy walk. So they decided they both would walk. So later on, they passed some more people that thought, man, that sure is stupid to walk when they have a good donkey to ride. So they both hopped on the donkey. Then later on, again, they passed more people that said, what a shame. How awful it is. You put such a heavy load on that poor old donkey. So the boy and the man said they were probably right. So they decided to actually carry the donkey. And as they crossed the bridge, they lost their grip on the animal. He fell into the river and drowned. So the moral of the story is, in marketing, if you try to please everyone, you might as well kiss your ass goodbye. Now on to the Sales Podcast Creed, which is today is my day. I work diligently towards my goals, which are bigger than me. I bite off more than I can chew because only then will I truly know my current limits, and surpassing them becomes my new goal for today. Through education, accountability partners, and bold, decisive action, today will be better than yesterday, and tomorrow will be better yet. I'm ready to produce. Now please welcome Mr. Michael Hyatt. Michael Hyatt, all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, Wes. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for rescheduling when I missed our first time. I'm so embarrassed and mortified, but you were gracious enough to come back.
Not a problem.
Believe it or not, there might be some people. I think I have 2 listeners that don't know who you are. So for those 2 people, would you mind just take a second or two, kind of give everybody a thumbnail sketch of your background and who you are and what you do, and we'll dive into it?
Sure. I spent almost my entire career life, my adult life, in the book publishing industry. Most recently as the chairman and CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishers, which was acquired by HarperCollins in 2011. And at that point, I made my exit from the company, realized that I had an opportunity to do something I'd always dreamed of doing, which was to write and speak full-time. And that's what I do through my blog and my podcast and Platform University, which is my membership site. I reach about 500,000 people a month.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying your content. It was good meeting you back in San Diego. I think it was January, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, we went to dinner with the Infusionsoft folks. But what would you say to people You had a very successful career in corporate America for decades before launching your own venture. But you were still beginning to blog and kind of lay the foundation before you left corporate America, right?
Yeah, exactly. I started blogging actually in 2004, so about 8 years before I exited the corporate world.
And I see this as common, like Pat Flynn, John Lee Dumas. It seems most people began laying the foundation for their entrepreneurial launch while they were still in corporate America. Would you say that's the safest course? I mean, the recommended. Well, John's a little different. He just quit cold turkey, but he had money in the bank. But I see people, they get frustrated with the lack of success, because they see Pat and John and you having great success, but there was a lot of work behind the scenes before you had this fame and glory, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Behind every overnight success is usually years of work. And in my case, that was definitely the case. For the first 4 years that I began blogging, and I never even thought that it might end up being my full-time work, but I was just trying to connect with people and be helpful. But for 4 years, I didn't have more than 1,000 readers a month. So that took me 4 years to break through that barrier. And then it grew. I kind of hit my inflection point, and it grew rapidly. But I think if you're contemplating leaving a corporate job and you'd like to be a content creator or platform builder or something along these lines, have an online business, I wouldn't quit my day job just cold turkey, because it does take a while. The guys that have done it really well, I know some guys that have done it in about a year, but it's not something like you're just going to walk into another job. That usually doesn't have to happen, because you have to build a tribe, you have to build a following, people who trust you and are willing to buy stuff from you.
So looking back on how you began, so 2004 versus now, so that's 10 years. Would you say if we moved a time machine, right, and you were starting now, is it easier, you think? Is it harder?
It's definitely easier. On the one hand, it looks like it's harder because there are more people online trying to do this than ever before, but the truth is most of them are not doing it well.
Yep.
So if you're intentional about it, deliberate about it, you can really stand out more easily. Plus, the technology's easier. When I started, it was tough.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's not tough now. I mean, there's some aspects of it that are tougher than others, but I think the technology is easier than ever before. We know stuff now. We know what works now, and we didn't know. I was just kind of casting around, learning kind of by accident and by trial and miss. But now we've got some bona fide strategies that work for almost everybody.
What do you tell people, though, that may be looking at you? I mean, people always want to find an excuse, right? Oh, my business is different. My life is different. Oh, yeah, of course, Michael, you have all the success. You were a big CEO. Oh, woe is me. I can't follow your example because I'm a peon. I'm just a sales guy. What do you say to people like that to knock some sense into their head and point them in the right direction?
Well, first of all, it's totally legitimate criticism. I mean, I get that. And I think people naturally want to create excuses for themselves.
Right.
The biggest challenge that most people have of trying to build an online business, particularly if they've got a full-time job, is they say, well, I just don't have the time. Mm-hmm. Well, I was the CEO of a company with 650 people, $250 million worth of revenue, very full-time job, a board that, was yanking my chain every time they got a chance, and 5 daughters. I know you have a lot of kids, but I had 5 daughters. And so I was able to carve out that time because it was important to me. I think in many ways, Wes, I was handicapped by being a CEO, not only because of the demands of my job, but because most CEOs don't have credibility. You're kind of guilty until proven innocent. And so I had to, demonstrate, and it took a lot of years to demonstrate to people that I really was interested in helping them and adding value to their lives. I don't think most CEOs do that, and I don't think at least the public doesn't believe that that's what they're about.
Everybody knows in this community, obviously, like Pat Flynn's story, and he was an accidental success, right?
Yeah.
He was starting the LEED certification thing for his architect. I mean, would you recommend people just kind of start with a passion and see how that maybe blossoms? Or would you say, no, here, map out a 12 or a 24 or 36-month game plan to go and monetize something to launch your entrepreneurial venture?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to do it, and the way that I've done it isn't the only way to do it. But the great thing about keeping your day job and trying to build this on the side is that it does give you the luxury of exploring what you're passionate about and see if you could build a following around that. And the more narrowly niched it is, the better. But the more specific need you can address, the more you can add value, specific value to people's lives, the more likely it is going to be to succeed.
And I've heard contradicting advice as well. One is follow your passion. If you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And others are like, well, you know what? If your passion is hummingbird beak cleaning, maybe there's not a big market for that. So go find a need. Go find an itch. Figure out how to scratch it, and you'll make all the money you want. So.
I think there's two things we're trying to do here. One is we want to make a successful living, and we'd like to have fun doing it. And I think that kind of success, that kind of fulfillment, is found at the intersection of kind of three concentric circles. And one of them is your passion. What do you love doing? What gets you up in the morning? What do you daydream about? What do you fantasize about? So that's your passion. But then you've also got to have, and this is the second circle, there's got to be competence. You got to be good. There's got to be the performance component where you're good at what you're passionate about. I may be passionate about becoming a breakout rock star, but if I can't carry a tune, that's probably not going to happen.
Right.
And then once you have those two, then there's the third concentric circle, and that is market demand. There's got to be a demand in the marketplace for what you have to offer, because just because you're passionate about it and good at it doesn't mean the market's going to pay you to do it. And I live in Nashville, Tennessee, as you mentioned at the top of the show. And we have a lot of people waiting tables that love music, that are really good musicians, but there's just too many of them in this marketplace.
Mm-hmm. So how do you make, speaking of that, right, how do you make your lucky break? Because I know dealing with business owners, people are allergic to sales and marketing. It's in a way, it's sad, right? But also it gives me a chance to have a business helping people figure that out. But I have learned, and I tell people it's kind of sad, but I feel like it's almost 10% product and 90% promotion. I mean, would you agree roughly with those numbers, or at least that mindset that you got to go out and make, you got to shout from the rooftop, hey, I'm a good singer, I'm a good whatever, to really get this, your lucky break?
Well, I'm not sure I would. I'm not sure I would agree with that entirely, Wes, because I know the thing that happened for me, my inflection point, and the reason why I've been able to build a business as rapidly as I have in the last 3 years, is because I really made it about my audience, not about me. And I think this is where most businesses get it wrong. They see themselves as the hero in their own story, and everybody else is a means to their hero enlargement and the prominence of their story. What really shifted for me was when I started making it about my audience, and I made my customers the hero, and I see myself as a guide. I'm here to help you be the hero of your own story and find whatever solution it is you're trying to find. But I think it's a mindset. I think, I don't think it's any one thing, but I think if you add value to people consistently and they can look to you to provide solutions for the real problems that they're facing, and the more you know your customers, the more you know their demographics and psychographics, and specifically in the last one, pain points, the more likely you can sell them stuff. Because then it doesn't feel like selling. It just feels like you're here solving their problems.
Right. Oh, I agree 100%. But it's like, as you were saying, for 4 years, you had under 1,000 readers. I mean, having gotten to know you a little bit over this time, I mean, I feel like you've probably been always the same person, right? An honest guy, good guy, doing good work. But until and unless more than 1,000 people hear about you, you're not going to move the needle in the universe. You can't help anybody because nobody has heard of you.
Well, and I think, first of all, let me just say, I'm not opposed to self-promotion at all. I wrote an entire book on how to build a platform and get noticed. But I do think that something fundamental shifted for me in year 4, and I had a little bit of a Copernican revolution where I discovered that I wasn't at the center of the universe, that for most people, they're the center of their own universe, and I can have an orbit around that. But getting very focused on my readers, let me be very specific. What I did was I conducted a reader survey, and I found out what my readers were struggling with, what their dreams were, what their aspirations were, what their pain points were. And then I started writing or creating my content around solving those problems or addressing those problems. That's when my platform took off.
Gotcha.
The 4 years previously, I really wasn't doing that. I wasn't listening. I didn't really care.
Right.
But once I made that shift and started zeroing in on the reader, that's when things took off.
Gotcha. So let's assume that our listeners are good people. They found an itch in the marketplace that they can indeed scratch. Where do they start? I mean, I'm going to assume they have a blog, have a website. I always tell people that's your hub, right? That's the center. All other marketing drives to there. But where do they begin? I mean, how do they know when to do YouTube videos or podcasts or write a book?
Well, if you're talking about an intentional monetization strategy, I wished I'd begun earlier doing one thing, and that is collecting email addresses.
Okay.
I'm sad to say, when I left Thomas Nelson, and you'd think I would have learned this by then, but when I left Thomas Nelson in 2011, I had about 2,500 people subscribed to my blog. Now, I had, I think, about 100,000 unique visitors a month at that time.
Wow.
But I didn't have their email.
Mm-hmm.
And so I suddenly realized I didn't really have a way to create the kind of nurturing campaign that would build the trust that would allow me to sell to them. So I got very serious, and I think this is critically important. I got very serious about collecting email addresses and forging that more intimate kind of relationship, creating an email magnet or an email bribe. And I went from 2,500 to about 73,000 in the first 9 months by being intentional.
Wow.
And that made a huge difference in my business and in my life. But then I think to myself, man, if I had started at the beginning, I think that's job number one. Focus on your email list. You can't, until you've got that, you really can't do a lot.
Gotcha. And so how did you know what to focus on? Was it through that survey, and then you just started creating like free reports and stuff? Because I know people are some are rolling their eyes like, oh my gosh, email, are you serious? It's all social media. It's all SMS. It's all mobile now. And lead magnets are so yesterday, and free reports. I mean, what do you tell those people?
I say if you've got the right content that people really want, and it doesn't have to be an ebook, and that's what I did initially, but it's got to be something that gives people a quick win. And if it promises a quick win and then it really delivers, like you really do your best work, on my email magnets, I really try to deliver huge value. And people say to me oftentimes, well, gosh, I want to hold back my best stuff because I want to charge for that. Let me tell you something. If you don't give away your best stuff initially, you may never have the chance to charge them for something even more valuable. And my perspective is that there's more where that came from. If I lead with my best stuff and give it away, there's going to be other stuff that's going to replace it. And I've consistently experienced that for the 10, 11 years I've been online doing this.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that people tend to undervalue their knowledge?
Totally. Absolutely. Everyone is an expert in something. And there are things that most people take for granted that they know how to do. They've got the skill set, whatever. But they don't realize that there are other people out there that would pay to be able to do that. And that's why, honestly, it was one of the best books. I give this book away all the time, but it's Brendan Burchard's book, The Millionaire Messenger, because he talks about how to become an expert and how to charge for it in very specific ways.
Gotcha. I was just going to ask, what would you say people do? So, because it's hard. It's the old saying, it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle, right?
Yeah, I've never heard that, but that's a great saying. I'm going to steal that.
All right, you can steal it because I think I stole it, and I don't remember who I stole it from. So it's one of those ancient Chinese proverbs, I guess.
That's right.
Did they have labels on their bottles? I don't know.
I don't know.
So read Brendan. I mean, Brendan's great as well. I mean, would you recommend people join mastermind groups or find a coach or just buckle down? I mean,
well, I have a firm conviction that you should hire the best coaches that you can afford. Now, there have been times in my career when the best coach I could afford was reading a book that I checked out at the library.
Yep.
But we have so much available to us today, whether it's podcasts. Oh my gosh, I'm amazed at the quality of the podcasts out there, particularly for entrepreneurs and for people that are in marketing and sales. So, yeah, avail yourself of whatever you can get. Masterminds, terrific way to get really specific and get your ideas honed and learn, for the best practices of other people who are succeeding in places where you're not. But yeah, all that stuff's available. That wasn't available to me when I was at the beginning of my career, but it's available now to almost anybody in any niche.
Which brings up another problem. I mean, how do people stay focused? Because that's, I did a thing just a couple of weeks ago, and I offered people, ask me your question, send in your question. And, I felt so bad. This lady, I know her. She's local. She's a client, very good at what she does. But she's like, how do I focus? Because people are drawn in, that you get on a list and you're on another list. And, hey, master these SEO tips, master these YouTube tips, and then they don't master anything.
Yeah, they don't. And you can spend all your time just learning and never executing. And I think you got to force yourself to execute. So I think you got to balance that. For me, the only way I know how to do it is to be proactive and set that time aside on my calendar when I'm going to learn. But then when I'm not learning, I'm working. I'm applying what I'm learning. I'm fine-tuning it. I'm getting better at it. But I'm constantly going through something. For me, usually that involves listening to it in my mobile device when I'm out for a run in the morning.
And I do that as well. I don't run. I get on a bike, or I'm starting to swim now. I really like that because I can't do anything but swim and listen to my own brain, which is kind of scary sometimes, but that's a whole other subject.
The committee in your head.
But, I mean, do you have, some focus tips, some time-saving tips? I know you wrote a book on having an assistant, right? I mean,
right.
Can that help people? I mean,
absolutely.
Do you tell them to start earlier than maybe they? Because I know when I first got my assistant, I was scared, and then I was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this earlier? Because that did free me up.
Every time I've hired an assistant, it's allowed my income to go to another level. And the reason for that is, as it turns out, I'm not good at everything. And it doesn't make sense, and I'm just making this as an example, but if I can earn $50 an hour, but I'm doing work that I could pay somebody $12 an hour to do, that's not very efficient. That's not a good use of my time.
Mm-hmm.
So the more I can free myself up to do the work that I can get paid, my top dollar for, the better off I'm going to be. So what the process has been for me, particularly as an entrepreneur after leaving corporate America, is continuing to narrow on where I add value and just delegating or hiring or outsourcing the rest. And the more I do that, the more money I make, the more focused I am, the more joy I have, frankly, because then I'm in my sweet spot. I'm doing the things that I love where I experience flow. But I'm not doing that when I'm doing some of the things that I'm not good at.
I know it's a shameless plug, but I mean, you've got your book, The Virtual Assistant Solution. I mean, but how? I guess that's a good place to start for people, because I know initially it was hard for me to kind of let go. I'm like, oh, heck, I got to slow down and train this person. But you got to do it, right?
Yeah, you do. And that book that I wrote, you can find it on Amazon, The Virtual Assistant Solution. But it kind of is my whole experience with virtual assistants and how you can increase the odds of being successful and how you can justify paying for them and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it is. I think the difference between people that are successful and that are not successful is that successful people understand the power of making that one-time investment and reaping rewards for years. And sometimes people say, well, it's just easier for me to do it myself. If I take the time to explain it to an assistant, I could do it faster if I just did it myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's true the first time. But it's totally stupid economically. Because if you'll invest that extra time the first time, maybe the second time or third time, and then you're able to never think about it again. Wes, get this. I just got back from Europe. I spent 30 days there with my wife. I got 5 emails that entire time, so I wasn't connected to email. I had an emergency email, so somebody needed to connect with me, and so my daughter did 5 times, just 5 questions that she had. But other than that, I didn't check email. I didn't get any phone calls. The business ran fine. I came back to it on September the 1st. Everything was fine. It was cooking. But that was because I'd invested the time over the last 3 years to delegate to people so that the critical parts of my business can operate without me being present to make it work.
Yeah. kind of piggybacking on, not necessarily, but on the book, I notice on your website, you don't have all of your books listed. So people do have to go to Amazon to get some. How do you know what to put on your site, what not to, what to emphasize? Because on the one hand, it seemed like you'd want everything on your site, you get more money, but then maybe it's better with Amazon with fulfillment, and you can focus on the newer stuff. Is that what you're doing?
Well, that's pretty much it. I mean, the stuff that's, book sales for me, I just rather have somebody else operate it, because my whole philosophy in books, and again, I spent over 35 years in the book publishing industry as a publisher, but I see a book as a very fancy business card. Mm-hmm. It fills the top of the funnel, but it's not a place where I'm looking to make a lot of money. And I have made a lot of money on books, but for the most part, that's come in the form of royalties and royalty advances. But Amazon has an extraordinary platform, and their discovery engine is fabulous, and that's a great place to be.
It's just a bummer, though. They don't give you the contact information.
That is a bummer. Now, I'm on the board. This is going to sound like a plug, but I'm on the board of a company from Dallas, Texas called Bookshout. And they are developing an amazing engine for authors and for entrepreneurs, for anybody that wants to sell their own digital content, book product off their own site. It's a pretty cool platform, and it's going to be, I think, an alternative, not on the retail side, but an alternative for authors to Amazon.
Yeah, cool. All right. I will have to look them up, and we'll put those in the show notes. So speaking of books, though, so two things I want to get in before we got to go, and that's, some publishing tips and some speaking tips. Do you have some words of wisdom around getting published that's maybe people don't always hear and they need to know?
Well, yeah, a couple things. And I'm assuming in this context, most of the people that would be listening to you or listening to me are going to want to write a nonfiction book. So we're not talking to budding novelists. That's like a different process altogether. But for people that want to write a nonfiction book, business book, leadership book, something of that nature, the most surprising thing I think most people don't know is that you don't have to write the book to get a publishing deal. What you have to write is a killer proposal. And if you've never written before, probably a couple sample chapters. But the publisher does not want to see an entire manuscript. What they want to see is a proposal in a specific format. And I do sell an ebook on my site called Writing a Winning Book Proposal, and you can go to michaelhyatt.com and find it. But it's become kind of the de facto standard in the publishing industry for how proposals are created. But I walk you by the hand through the process. But once you have a proposal, then you can start shopping for an agent, and an agent can start shopping for a publisher. But there's nothing, Wes, that credentials you more, gives you more authority in this culture than being a published author. There's just something about it. It's more important than a PhD. It's more important than your experience. If you're a published author, that takes you to an entirely different level.
Man, now you're going to put the pressure on me.
I'm putting the pressure on you, buddy. You got to do it.
Well, I've got 2 books, but they're self-published. So, all right, I got to, more important than a PhD. So do I tell this to my senior son, senior in high school, say, look, just go write a book. Don't worry about college?
Well, I would say this to your son. The most important thing they can do, even more important than building a platform, they're going to need this once they decide to write a book.
Yep.
Or the platform is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was recently speaking at Merrimack College in Boston, and one of the professors said, what's the most important thing that we could be teaching our students today? And I said, teach them to blog, build a platform, and connect with readers. Because if they can do that, it's totally portable. They can take it with them anywhere. They can make a living off of it. And that's essentially what I've done. And then when you write a book, you got somebody to sell it to.
Right. So what comes first then? It's kind of the chicken and the egg, right? Do they start blogging to build a list and make the blog content spill over into the book so you have the content, and then you know what I mean? Because it's how do you get that platform, right?
Well, it's kind of it is a little bit of a chicken and egg thing, but I would say it's not the chicken or the egg; it's the chicken and the egg.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to do both. The great thing about a blog, and I've done this several times now, is the blog becomes kind of my laboratory where I test content,
mm-hmm.
and then I gather it together. And I'll stitch it together and polish the rough edges and all that, but turn it into a book. And I used to say, and some dumb publishers, and there's still some of them out there, will say, well, why would anybody buy this book? It's already been published on your blog. Let me tell you something. I've sold tens of thousands of books that people could have got the exact same content on my blog if they had the time, and they don't, but if they had the time to dig for it and assemble it. People will pay for the convenience of having it all gathered in one place. My New York Times best-selling book, my last book, Platform, that's exactly what I did. Those were almost all of it was blog posts before it got published as a book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've created 187 links to your website for every chapter, so I got it. It's ready.
Thank you.
So that's great advice. What about speaking? What would you tell people to? Should they join the NSA? Should they try to do it on their own? Do they start locally? I mean, that's another great way to get the word out, right? But it's like anything else, it ain't easy.
It's not easy. The NSA is a tremendous organization, and having a group of people that are committed to upping their professionalism is awesome. Toastmasters is another great one. But what I would recommend, the first thing, if you're serious about speaking, if you want to get more speaking, the first thing you got to do is hang a shingle and let people know that that's part of what you do. So I recommend create a speaking page. And in my book, Platform, Get Noticed in a Noisy World, I've got an entire chapter devoted to how to create a speaking page that gets results. In fact, when I studied speaking pages and I rebuilt my speaking page, my invitations quadrupled. And I don't do as much speaking anymore as I used to because I find that creating content that works when I'm asleep is a better return on my investment today. But I still do a fair amount of speaking.
Right.
But you got to have a speaking page because here's what happens. If your content's resonating, you're going to ultimately connect with event planners who are looking to book a speaker for their next corporate engagement or trade conference or show or whatever. And don't make it difficult for them. Think of yourself as a product and create a sales page on you.
Yep.
And I talk about the format of that, including how to follow up. In other words, what's the call to action on that page? What does that need to look like? What does it need to be?
Yep. What do you say to people, though, that tell you, well, it's kind of the chicken and the egg where they say, well, show me your sample videos. It's like, well, I can't even sample videos till I get hired to speak. So how do they provide that when they really haven't been on stage?
One of the best things to do is to speak for free early. Mm-hmm. And I did this for a couple of years where I just said, I couldn't get anybody to pay me. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll come speak at your event if I can record it or if you'll record me. And so I gathered a lot of video, a lot of audio early on, and then a lot of video that ended up becoming my demo reel. And then after you get that, then you got, paying events are recording you and you get even better stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, in the beginning, you got to start with what you've got. I mean, it's just like, how do you get a job and you don't have any experience?
Exactly.
You got to make that an asset that you can tout.
Mm-hmm.
Not an excuse.
Yep. Very nice. Well, I thank you, sir. The best place for people to reach you is your website, right? michaelhyatt.com.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a podcast and I got a lot of products, but you can find it all there at michaelhyatt.com.
Very nice. And a couple of times a year, you've got some big conferences, right? I know we just missed one with the timing of this, but when is your next gigs in 2015?
Well, we do 3 conferences a year that I co-host with my business partner, Ken Davis. We do one called the Launch Conference, which is all about the business of public speaking. How do you make a living doing that, sell back of the room sales, create demand, all that. Then we do a conference called the Score Conference, which honestly, Ken was doing this before I ever got involved with him as a partner. And I said to him, this is the single best, most important conference I've ever attended because we teach people how to prepare and deliver speeches that really connect and that people never forget. And it's a whole process. We have certified coaches in that system, and we work with you over the course of 4 days, and it's amazing how you can improve in 4 days. And then we do a conference called the Platform Conference, which is coming. The next one of those is in November of 2014. And that's where I bring in some of the world's best platform builders, people that are kind of household names in the social media world, and we all learn from them for a couple of days. And in fact, Infusionsoft is a sponsor of that conference.
Yeah, I think it's overlapping the Infusionsoft Partner Conference. That's why I can't make it, but I will be at the next one.
All right, great.
Well, thank you, sir. Everybody, please visit michaelhyatt.com, and I thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you, Wes. Great to be with you.
All right, man. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
There you go. What you see with Michael is what you get. He is as nice in person as he appears to be online, which is not always the case. He is down to earth. He's honest. He shares his stories, his advice, his wins, his losses. He talks about how he blogged for years. He didn't have that intentional monetization strategy. I'll get that right eventually. He was just, he thought if he just built a better mousetrap and put it out there, if you build it, they will come. And of course, he learned that is not the case. It's never the case. So you have to be intentional about generating leads, having an email list, building the email. Everybody I've ever spoken to, from John Lee Dumas to Pat Flynn to Michael Hyatt, they talk about making sure you're building your list. I had Jay Baer on many months ago with Convince and Convert. And he said, you have no business doing social media until you get email marketing right. That's the only thing you can truly own, right? Because everything else is somebody else's platform, and they'll change the rules on you. So, there's an old adage in marketing, whoever has the biggest list wins. So make sure you're putting out content that's focused on the audience, but bring them back to your site with an offer. We call it a lead magnet, some type of bonus or free report or resource guide, something that has them opt in. And then you can drip on them. You nurture them. You provide additional value and resources and content until they finally buy from you. And then you have an upsell, right? And then keep them coming back for more. You over-deliver. You endear them to you. Then they become a promoter of you. That's when you get your referrals and your testimonials, and then it builds on itself. And that's how people achieve this exponential type growth. When you look at a compound table, you'll realize it's slow going at first. The old story of, do you want $1 million today, or will you take a penny today and I'll double it every day for a month? Without having the table in front of me, just suffice it to say, if you took the $1 million today, you would lose out on over $20 million over 30 days. But somewhere around 94 or 97% of the growth happens in the last 4 days. So you've got to stay at it, right? But the main thing is you have to know that you're doing the right things, because it's foolish to keep driving down the wrong road, okay, going in the wrong direction. So if you're sure you're on the right road, you're going in the right direction, then just stay at it. I always say time kills deals. One of the best ways to improve your sales is to compress your sales cycles. So you could shorten your marketing cycles, right, by getting more things done, blogging more often, creating podcasts, creating more content. But make sure you're sharing that, promoting it out to the world. And that's what, Michael talked about. He went from 2,500 people on his list to 73,000 in his first 9 months after he was intentional. So, as always, go back, re-listen to this multiple times. There's a lot of good notes, little nuggets in there. If you want to listen to this, you can visit thesaleswhisper.com/Michael-Hyatt for the show notes. And as always, I appreciate you listening. Please show a little love, share this online, and remember to sell different.